Well, welcome everybody, and we're on the second of the journeys through land and time in Spain. Here's the map of Spain. The previous time we did the pre-Roman, the Roman, the Visigoth, and also the Muslim. So here we see that here, eras. Basically, to recap briefly for those that didn't see it. So pre-Roman time started around about 20,000 years before. We have the Cro-Magnon people, at least their language in the Basque region, the Basque and Navarre region. We had some Stone Age people here. Then you had the incursions of the Celts and the Phoenicians about 1000 BC on the coast. The Celts coming a couple of hundred years later and penetrating most of this part, mixing to produce a new Celto-Iberian culture. Then the Romans, then the Phoenicians gave way to the Carthaginians, basically the same thing. Greeks came in at the north. Then the Romans from 200 in the Third Punic War took 200 years to subdue the country, reigned for another 450 years. Then they gave way to the Visigoths. The Visigoths kept going for about from 450 till about 710, when the Muslims came in, invited by the one Visigoth king so that he could beat the other. And once they got there, they stayed. And they actually finally brought, the Roman times were great. The Visigoths were sort of middling. The Muslims brought the golden era of culture and decency and everything else. And that went to 1492, which is where we stopped last time, if you remember, with the conquest of Granada. And so here's Granada down over here. This was all happening in Andalusia, was the capital at the time for the Muslims. And then, so now we get to the REQUCONQUISTA. So the REQUCONQUISTA was, remember what happened was the Visigoths basically got pushed up into Asturias here and Galicia. Not the coastline, because the road was in the sea and the coastline was occupied by the Moors. But this inland, which was very poor, very hilly, and basically not worth capturing. And then they gradually expanded, and we stopped with that part of the Visigoth discussion, with their moving from the capital of Oviedo down to Leon and establishing that. So that's where we pick up the reins with in the REQUCONQUISTA. So here you'll see the towns that we've already seen: Toledo, Cordoba, Sevilla, Granada, Zaragoza. You can read them all there. And these are the ones we're going to see today, although we're not going to do Valencia because I don't think we'll have the time. So as before, whenever I'm showing you a town, I always put a star there so you can see where it is. I followed the process of saying, okay, trying to show you Spain, how do you ask me to show you the pictures of Spain and tell you some stories, but how do you structure it? So I've structured it chronologically, but you can see there overlaps in periods, and I jump around in terms of where it is and try and just group them time-wise. So as I say, they went to Leon. So here Leon is up in the north, not that far away. It was Alfonso V that moved down there. These are the old Roman walls over here. Further on, you'll see the church, which is itself 1,000 years old. It's a beautiful town. This is the Basilica di San Isidoro, which is built around about the year 1000. You can see the very pure Romanesque forms. The statues are quite primitive in their style, almost Byzantine. Incredible detail, and done in a completely different style from anything that you've seen that I've shown you before, say from France or wherever. Here you see these, you have to really try and work out what they're doing here. Obviously a lot of demons and bestiaries. I found this very interesting, this roof style. Let's see if I can move out the way. The way that the roof has been built is almost Etruscan. I'm just going to duck out the way here so you can see it. You look at that edging there. This is all original, and this whole wall here, everything's original. This is quite fascinating.
Is it a buttress, Thomas?
Okay.
Is it a buttress, that little piece that you had in the photo before?
No,
Or is it just decorative?
it's decorative. It's a roof. You know, this is not a Gothic building, so it doesn't need buttresses.
Got it.
Because it's fairly low, and you know, the windows are rounded. They're not just getting that height. Here, the inside, we weren't allowed to take pictures, so my cell phone accidentally took a couple. But that's all I can show. And the interesting thing is, this is the original painting. It's 1,000 years old, possibly a bit more. And you'll notice that everything has writing everywhere. And you might remember, if you think back to the Vézelay, when I told you about Vézelay and Autun, that nowadays you have to try and work out what's going on with the capitals of the columns and pillars, because in the old days, there was writing everywhere. They told you what it was. They told you what to look at. And of course, they were painted as well. So this is a fascinating thing to look at. But I say, unfortunately, not the best pictures because of the restrictions. So what you have, if you remember, the Moors came in 710. They came into Cadiz in order to beat up the brother of this one. There were two kings, if you remember, the Visigoth, two Visigothic kings, the sons of the previous king, and the Bishop of Seville, here's Seville, together with the one king, brought in the Moors. They came into Cadiz in order to beat up the brothers' forces, which were here. And then they said, well, once you finish, please leave again, which they didn't. They came in 710, and by 720, they had taken the entire country. By 725, they'd pushed way up, 721, they'd pushed way up into France. And you'll remember that Charles Martel drove them back at the Battle of Poitiers in 725. And then it wasn't the French, but say the non-Moors, the people that lived up here, the Merovingians, the Franks, drew a borderline here where the Pyrenees are. So this is the northern part of the Pyrenees, the southern part's about there. And they started putting in lots and lots of towers. So if you look here, you'll see, do you see this tower here? This is the original one. So what they did is they snuck into the country and they gradually built this tower. And once they could get inside, then they stayed in there and they'd make raids. And then they built the tower next to it, and then they built something more, and then they built a curtain wall eventually. And over a period of 100 or 200 years, they built this thing out. The country itself at the time was still Moorish, but they were fairly dispersed. And they did this over and over again. This was the approach which was started by Charles the Great, Charlemagne. And in doing that, he created this continuous defense line, which stopped the Moors from going further. What he also did, I'll just show the pictures as I'm talking. You'll see here the curtain wall. Here, this is the entrance, and they have all sorts of secret openings here that they can throw nasty things on people coming in. So, and what he did was that what happened was the people that were occupying these towers became the knights. And the entire chivalry, knightly class, all of that is originated in this area with these towers, because they then became the protectors of the people that could rush there when anything was happening. And as such, they started getting power and then wealth and land and all the rest. And then the church got involved, you know, together with the church, they expanded their influence. And that's how the knightly class came about, which is quite fascinating. This is a beautiful church in here, which is very Romanesque. You see the interesting capitals. You'll remember this one, if you remember what I told you about the southern Provence, in the Provence, the style, that basket style, you see exactly the same basket style here. And that's not surprising, because Catalonia, and so if you look at the map here, this area here, Catalonia, this is Aragon here, but this whole Catalonian Aragon area and the area around Toulouse, they spoke the same language. They were effectively one people, and the Provence were very close to them. Obviously, the French up in Paris were totally different. And so that was basically one people, which was split by a border. And so you have they built a monastery in there, which has fallen away. And here order is, this is quite dark. I don't know why it's not as light as it should be. This is order sitting on the toilet that the Duchess had put into her apartment back in about 1100. So we now move, also we're still staying in Aragon. So this is Aragon here. Catalonia is down the side. And this is a monastery that was built around about 730 AD. So when the Muslims came and took over the country, this is a dead-end valley. It's a long dead-end valley, so they could see people coming. And their monastery is in this huge cliff. They've actually carved it in. And if anybody had to come into the valley, then they would be able to disappear and then come back again when the people had gone. So what you see here is the Holy Grail. I'm just going to stoop down. They had the original Holy Grail. Obviously, there's also one in Paris, so you can argue about which one's original. In fact, you can argue about whether any of them are original. But then if you consult Dan Brown, you'll find a scientific explanation, which is completely untrustworthy as all his books are.
I thought it was Monty Python. Yeah.
You're right. You look at this. This has been carved into the rock and is quite stunning. Old graves. Everywhere you have this overhanging rock, see, which is the ceiling. Outside, there's just quite magnificent courtyard with all the carvings. Now, my aim is not to show you, I could show you lots about this thing. I could spend the whole time just talking about this one thing, but I'll just keep moving through. So now we move to another part. This is now in Catalonia. This is called Vic. It's a town. And what I'm showing you here is the artwork from the era. This is during the time of the Reconquista. So what they did there was they had these large, they life-sized, articulated wooden models. And they would do, at Easter and Christmas time and everything else, they would enact the actual ceremony. So people didn't act it, but they used models for it. They would have been clothed as well. These are absolutely beautiful, and they're 1,000 years old. Here you see, so there was Byzantine influence coming in. And in those days, you had a Roman Catholic Church, like we're saying with Peter just now. The Gothic Church goes incredibly high. That's the whole purpose of it. Whereas the Romanesque was reasonably squat and low. So as a result, the altar, they didn't have the retable or altarpiece behind the altar, which would rise up, which they have in the Gothic times, but they had an altar front. So in other words, this piece, it's wood, probably about, I don't know, 8 feet wide, 10 feet wide, and it went in front of the altar, sort of below the stomach level of the priest, and covered that. And only once you had the Gothic church did you have this great space above, and they started building these retables and altarpieces that resembled a church itself, because they had Gothic spires and everything else. This is still good old Romanesque time. And you'll see, so they didn't actually have the Marian cult there until around about late 1000s, when it was brought in from Byzantine through marriage. And here, but this is the early part. In the early part, Jesus sat in the middle of Mary. Whereas if you see here, I'm going to duck again, you see here, Jesus migrates to Mary's knee. And so this is always a way of telling the way, which era it is. This is probably from 1215. This is probably about 1150 or something like that. Here we have another scene here with good old Lawrence getting roasted on the flames. They're doing a really good job of barbecuing him there. I think they have some fantastic, there's a fantastic amount of things to see. This museum is stunning. Again, I could spend 2 hours on that one. So we go back to Toledo again. You'll remember Toledo was the Visigoth capital. Toledo was a Roman town before that. So during the Reconquista, what happened was that in 1085, and that's why I've taken the date 1085, Alfonso VI invaded and took Toledo. Well, I say he invaded it, he actually agreed with the Muslims that it would be a peaceful handover. And here you see this is the Iglesia de San Tome, the St. Thomas Church. This is an old Muslim minaret, which got converted into a Christian church tower, and it got taken over by the church. Actually belonged to the Count of Ognas, and you might remember this is the most famous of El Greco's paintings, and we're going to talk quite a bit about El Greco as we go along. This is the death of and the burial of the Count of Ognas. So just here's Toledo down, just there's Madrid. Toledo's down a little bit southeast of Madrid. It's on the hill and is a very self-contained town, but because of its situation on a hill with a river going all the way around, it can't expand in size. So we did see Christa del Lutz last time in terms of a mosque. This is previously a synagogue, became a mosque, became a Christian church. Here's the Christian church, and quite spectacular the way they put the painting on the roof. Here, I just love these horseshoe arches. So the horseshoe arches are Visigothic in origin. You know, a normal arch goes like this, whereas the Visigothic arch has the horseshoe shape. That was taken over by the Moors and perfected. And you'll remember I showed you the great Cordovan mosque with those arches there. But this is, I think, a very beautiful shape. So there was a big Jewish population in Toledo at the time. They were very educated, very good at business. And this synagogue obviously is now a Catholic church. This is the El Transito, but it's all still the original decorations. We're talking about a 1,000-year-old synagogue. Here is Synagogue Santa Maria la Blanca. So the white Santa Maria, obviously Santa Maria is not Jewish, although she really was, I suppose, originally, but not in the present incarnation. But again, you have these phenomenal arches. It's wonderful scrolling. The Jews at the time also didn't have pictorial representations, just like the Muslims. So it's mostly writing and scrolls and plants and things like that as decoration. So as I said, Alfonso VI agreed with the Muslims that there would be a peaceful handover of the city, and in return for that, they were allowed to keep their places of worship, including the Great Mosque. Well, Alfonso VI had to go off and do more battles in other places, and his wife, together with the Bishop of Toledo, immediately went in, massacred most of the Muslims, and put the bell into the minaret and turned it into a Christian church. Big sign saying, you know, getting rid of the evil devils and all the rest. And when Alfonso got, well, obviously the Moors weren't happy about it and they were threatening to revolt. Alfonso got back, was really upset, actually had every single one of the uprisers put to death, and only his wife and I think the bishop got away with it. But he did keep the church. And so what happened was, this was the original mosque. That's the shape of the original mosque. And this over here on the side, which is now the cloisters, this huge cloisters, is the site where they had the outdoor area that they would walk around, the Muslims would, and I think it's called a saha or something like that. Anyway, so they followed exactly the plan, and the Muslims, well, obviously in 1492, then Isabel and Ferdinand, the king and queen, expelled all Jews and all Muslims from Spain. So it didn't do them much good in the end, but obviously that was 400 years earlier. So they managed to have a bit of a run. So inside, there's just the most immense amount of gold and statuary and stuff, very different in Spain from elsewhere, which makes it interesting. I didn't particularly like it, but it is very different. They obviously got an immense amount of gold and silver from the Americas and used that, squandered that in magnificent style in producing these quite over the top. This is a retablo, and you can see here some detail from it. All the figures and all the work. It's pretty. There's a lot to it. There's behind that altar, So there's the altar. Behind the altar, there's a Baroque altar. And this one goes way up in the sky. You can see this sort of tumult. It looks like a Bernini sculpture. And at the top, you have the paintings, painted walls, a painted ceiling with light and everything. It's very impressive in a Baroque way. Again, if you like that sort of thing. There's a huge monstrance in there. This monstrance is usually monstrances contain the different relics of the saints, and this one is about 15 feet high. It's made out of solid gold and silver, and it's a spectacular piece. The ceilings, the chapels, there are many chapels in this church, and they have the most magnificent paintings. This is an early Renaissance time painting from about 1420 or so. I've just taken a small section, but there's a lot of it. Then you go into the sacristy, and you might know Luca Giordano, who was Italian, but he spent a lot of time in Spain, and he painted massive paintings. I think he's a bit sort of second tier, but still. And this is the ceiling of the sacristy. It must be, I don't know, 80 feet long, 100 feet long. It's quite enormous. It's actually, the ceiling itself is barrel shaped, but it has this three-dimensional effect. Again, a lot of El Greco there as well, and quite a spectacular art gallery. Here's Titian's painting of Paul III. You know Pope Paul III. He was Alessandro Farnese. They said that he was the Pope's girlfriend's brother. That's why Pope Alexander VI, the Borgia Spanish Pope, had a girlfriend, and this is the brother. And because he was the brother, he became a cardinal, and then he became Pope. And he was quite an inquisitive fellow, and you didn't want to mess with him. There's Titian. You look at this Titian's painting of him with these almost claw-like hands. He was very grasping. He, you know, if you were in Ferrara or in any of those northern cities, he took all the art, took it into his personal collection. You can now see it in Naples, in the Capodimonte, a lot of that stuff. There's Caravaggio there. I must say it's a bit of an insipid Caravaggio, but still, you walk into this church and you see all these Titians. Titian, by the way, was we'll come back to him in the Empire time, his whole diplomatic element. So then we go to Zamora. So here's Zamora. So we're working our way down as the Reconquista happened. There was this castle in Zamora which never got taken. The town has never been conquered. And this is the original castle with its, you see all the various curtain walls that they had. A lot of stalks around, the churches with the stalks. And the interesting thing is that the history has been basically written by the Roman Catholic Church. And most of it happened since the Reformation or the Counter-Reformation in the 1600s onwards. So what really happened and what is presented as happening are two very different things. And a lot of the time, religion was a pretty free-for-all thing in a lot of the regions. This is an example. So here we are in the Iglesia de Santiago el Viejo. So that, Santiago is St. Jacob or St. James in English, and el Viejo, so they're calling the elder. In English, one would call him James the Greater, as opposed to James the Lesser, who was the brother of Jesus. And so this is just on the outside of this city, Zamora. This is a very ancient church, goes back to the late 900s, early 1000s. And it has fascinating capitals. If you look at this person on the left, he's grabbing her genitals, she's grabbing his genitals. If you look at what's going on here, they're throttling each other. There's just all sorts of stuff going on. This guy's falling down. You try and work out what it is. You can spend happy hours looking at this. If you look at this here, this guy's sitting here. He's got his penis in his hand, his testicles hanging out. I mean, this is not what you would expect in a normal church. And I haven't been able to find an explanation of what's going on. And I don't know if anyone knows. But this was a church. And so what I'm saying is when you go through these things, you question the sort of absolute doctrine and the simplistic history that has been sort of pared down over time in order to fit into the narrative. So in Zamora, there's again a cathedral that doesn't look like you'd expect a cathedral to look like. And this is an absolutely massive tapestry. It's actually much bigger. You remember back in the late medieval times, the walls were fairly porous, so the air got through, wind got through, heating wasn't that wonderful, and they didn't really have paintings that much. What they had were tapestries, massive tapestries. You'd hang the tapestries from the wall. You didn't really have carpets on the floor, and they kept the place, stopped the place from being drafty, kept it warm. And so, I mean, this tapestry, I don't know how big it is, probably 16 feet high and 10 feet wide or something. And there's an entire room full of these, quite magnificent detail. And so again, in Zamora, it's an old Roman town, and there's a Roman bridge, but it's a bit decrepit. And what was interesting is that they have a working mill, and running right across this entire river are a whole lot of stations, and they have them actually doing iron work and grinding corn and making all sorts of things. A lot of it's bashing with a hammer that gets each time it hits it, and then the hammer will hit something. And they manufactured a lot in there. Food, as always in Spain, wonderful, and it was a very lively city. I mean, there was football in the streets, or soccer. I really liked these people here. I thought that was really cute. There was some sort of graduation ceremony, and here you can see, and I'll duck down some lovers in the corner. Really, really interesting place. So now we go on. So we just were up here. We go a little bit south to Salamanca. This is Salamanca, absolutely beautiful city. Again, it's actually got two cathedrals, an old and a new. And what I'm showing you here is the university. The university is the second oldest in the world, second to Paris. And this is the magnificent library. This is the lecture hall. So you'll see here are the benches, and the lecturer stood here under this pulpit and basically talked. And these benches, when you look at they are the original ones. The wood has been chewed up over the centuries, and so Salamanca is quite a town to visit if you ever want to go somewhere. So now we go across from Salamanca to Burgos. So we're all up the top here. This is all Castile, this whole area, Castilia. And Burgos was the town that from Leon, they went to Burgos, the kings. So when Alfonso VI took to Toledo to take Toledo, he was living in Burgos at the time. As far as you could say, they lived anywhere. This is directly on the Camino de Santiago, the pilgrimage route. So the pilgrimage route comes out of France here and generally goes along here through Burgos and then up here and then off to Santiago here in Galicia. So there are a lot of pilgrims there, and we met some sitting when we were having dinner. Beautiful church. This is the pond in front of the water where the pilgrims could get water out of. And it's quite spectacular. Again, very different from the French, from what we'd seen, I'd shown you before. Beautiful windows. This is a later construction. The Queen was unhappy that the Gothic church was a little bit too dark, so she put in this incredible tower right in the middle. So this is looking straight up into it, and this is looking to it from the side. And it produces a great amount of light. There's the stalls, the choir stalls are from the late 1500s, so they're full-on Renaissance with wonderful Intarsienarbeit, I'm not sure the English word. Here you see a misericord, much fancier than the ones that we were looking at in France and in Switzerland. and retables everywhere, chapels with huge retables, all gilded. I'm showing you these not because I like them, but because it's something you just got to get to grips with. Another thing that they show, that they really like their life-size sculptures, especially in full gory detail. So I haven't put any of them up, but they really like to have a sort of almost naked Jesus with all these wounds and blood and guts and everything spilling out. And they seem to really enjoy that. Yeah, again, you see this fantastic ceiling with all the sculptures in it, and really standing out. So this is Burgos. And then this is called the Golden Staircase, which is their most prized possession. It actually goes out to the street at the top because it's Burgos on a hill. So you're going to go up and go out the back door. And they have the four kings there. So this is Pelayo. You remember Pelayo was the first Visigoth king. And then these are a couple of Alphonses and I think Sanchez. Not Sanchez the fat, but the other Sanchez. So that's just a quick sort of spin through the Reconquista. So what's happening is the non-Muslims are moving down southwards. So that by that the sort of Visigoth Spanish types. It later became a Christian movement, and it's got retrofitted into this wonderful, we need to get Christianity back in. But in actual fact, it wasn't that at all. As I told you last time, there was a tremendous amount of cooperation between the Muslims and the others in Spain. They fought for each other, they helped each other, and it only later got religious overtones, much later. So now we get into the Empire period. So the Empire period is really starts with 1492, or really 1460, when Ferdinand of Aragon, this is Aragon, and Isabella of Castile married. And this was a marriage, they seemed to get on well together, but it was also a contractual marriage. And it was very definite that Isabella was in charge. They ruled as equals, but she was more equal than he was. And he always kept that pact. But together they were an incredibly powerful team. And they basically combined, the Spanish peninsula. They didn't have Portugal at that time, but their daughter, their son married the daughter of the Portuguese king, so they got that. Galicia was always a bit of a trouble area anyway. What they then went on was Aragon also had taken the Balearic Islands, here, so Mallorca, Ibiza, so they could go and party there. Then they also took Sardinia, Naples and Sicily. These were called the two Sicilies. So you see, they actually owned a large part of Italy, which in the battle that always took place between the popes and the emperors and everything else was a major issue. So now you see Spain. You now have this entire Spain combined in the empire. And initially, for the first 30 years, Granada was still in Moorish control. And if you remember, in 1492, they conquered Granada. And now, actually, Ferdinand and Isabella are buried in the cathedral there. And at the same time, they pushed the button and let poor old Christopher Columbus, who'd been waiting in semi-captivity for, I think, 9 years or 7 years at that stage, they let him go and off he went. And the rest is history. So Spain grew immensely as a result of that. Here we are in 1790, and you will see that almost the entirety of the United States, the whole of Middle America, and all of South America, except for that which was owned by Portugal. So green is Portugal and blue is Spain. That was all owned by them. They then both lost it. They lost it both through their own stupidity and also American aggression. They lost most of this territory. They also, so here you see, this is the Italy. This is a Mercator projection, so obviously it skews things. Initially they had captured the Canary Islands, etc., and that was about 100 years before. That was what enabled them to have the springboard in order to go across. And then you also can see here that they had the Philippines too. So if we take that span of years, 1492 to 1790, the Spanish Empire was massive. And they should really have been able to do a lot more than they could have. Unfortunately, they were incredibly arrogant, incompetent, inept, and doctrinaire and wasteful, and fought endless battles, which they sometimes won, but it cost them way more than they got as a result. So let's have a look at that then. That's the summary of my opinion of what happened 300 years in Spain. So here we get back to Toledo again. So you'll see Toledo crops up over and over again. Unfortunately, this is where it stops, because so what we have is, following Isabel and Ferdinand, you get Charles II coming in, and Charles I, sorry, Charles I of Spain, who is also Charles V as the Holy Roman Empire. So he actually is Belgian. He happens to speak about 5 or 6 languages, and he learns Spanish, but he's really Belgian, or he actually, in those days, Dutch, but more and German, if anything else. But he moves to Spain, and he makes Toledo his capital. But he's now ruling an empire that covers the whole of Europe, almost the whole of Europe, and also he's got this burgeoning empire overseas as well, in the Americas and elsewhere. And so he rebuilds the Alhambra, and this is the Alhambra is rebuilt by Charles V, but let's call him the Emperor Charles V. And it's huge, because he needs to put all his administration in here. There wasn't so much a military thing. And unfortunately, Toledo was just bursting at the seams. He needed more people to run his empire, more place to put them. And so he started building Madrid. And you'll see Madrid here. This was knocked straight out the ground. It was not entirely new, but it was a tiny little place. And it's the geographic center of Spain. And he said, we need to have a proper capital city. And he didn't live to finish it. Philip II, his son, moved in there, and that's where things really took off. So so that's Toledo. There was buildings there. There's a beautiful hospital in Toledo, the Tavera Museum Duc de Lerma, and this was done by like a private association that built it. And you can visit it. They've still got the pharmacy there. They got all sorts of stuff there. Really fantastic. And of course, more El Grecos than you can shake a stick at. Huge El Grecos, including a little statuette that he made, which I think is the only one. El Greco is a bit of a sad case, because he is Greek. When you say Greek, he was actually from Crete, from Herculaneum and Crete. And but so obviously that's Greek speaking, but it was really Venetian, because it was a Venetian colony at the time. So when he left, so I think he started off being an illustrator, and he went from there. He went to Venice, obviously, because this was a Venetian colony. Worked in Venice for a while, so he was sort of Italian. And then from there he went to Spain to try his luck. And what he wanted to be was the court painter, because that was the best thing to be, was a court painter. But the Spanish kings and emperors and then kings were very, very austere and very religious. Outwards, they were very impassive and very, very not Puritan-like, but very puristic. And they thought that he was just he wasn't serious and somber enough for them. So he did all these paintings. He never became court painter. When they moved to Madrid, he wanted to go to Madrid, but he wasn't allowed to. He had to stay in Toledo. So as a result, you see lots and lots of El Greco in Toledo, and you might even get to like it. So we moved to Madrid. So here's Madrid. And obviously the star is here to show you where it is, but the dot's where it really is. So Madrid is this brand new city. It's got huge, wide boulevards. It's got huge monumental buildings, and it has probably the best art museum in the world. I say that advisedly. I think it's better than the National Gallery, because the painters were commissioned directly by the kings themselves. So by the Philip II, by Philip IV, by the others. So Titian came. This is Titian's painting. There are so many Titians there of the highest quality. You really, it's just astounding. Titian was also a diplomat. So Rubens later was also a very, very good diplomat. They could speak multiple languages, and also they had these guys captive. So you can imagine they were paid lots of money by whoever it was asking them to do something for them, these artists, because they could, if they had the right character. I wouldn't ask Michelangelo to do that because he didn't have any social graces, but Titian acted as a diplomat at the same time as he was doing the painting, which is an interesting dimension to it. Then Velasquez, so this was really Philip II, because I think Titian died about 1565, and so that was that generation. And 2 generations later, you had Philip IV. So Philip IV, this is him up on the right here. I mean, if I said the other guys were doer, Philip IV was said to have only laughed in public 3 times in his life. And this was very much because he was coached to behave this way. This is the way a king behaves. And but as a private person, he did have a sense of humor. Unfortunately, not so. The person that he really supported mostly was Velasquez. This is Velasquez himself in the famous Las Meninas. So you and I are standing here, and we are the king and queen. He's painting a picture of us while all the family looks on. The little girl here has her. Here you see the dwarves that were the playing companions of the children. That's what they had, their dwarves to do that. And you can see our reflection as the king and queen here in the mirror. This is a very famous painting. Unfortunately, this is very dark. I don't know if you can see here, he's got the cross of Santiago on the Order of Santiago on his chest. And he actually came, this is Velasquez, came and painted this I think a few years later, because he only got given the order later, and he was desperately socially climbing. He came, I think, from Seville, I think it was, and he actually was Jewish originally, not him, but his family. He was one of the convertos, or belonged to a convertos family. And so it was quite strange that somebody, even with the Jewish heritage, even if they were convertos for 150 years, that they were actually allowed to become a member of this Order of Santiago. I think it was because he was such a brilliant painter, and because he didn't let on that this was his history. But an interesting fact. So Philip IV went on squandering the money through endless wars. His father, Philip II, had the war against the Dutch, and which was I think 80 years it took. Started that off. He carried it on. Meanwhile, he started the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648, which was the Spanish versus the Protestants, and they put immense money into this. And what happened was the Spanish kings, there was an emperor, Charles I or Charles V, but then when he died, his brother, who was the king of Austria, took over the title, contested his daughter for the title, got the title. So from then on, they weren't the emperor anymore. They were just kings of Spain and the Spanish territories. And they saw themselves as the defenders of the Catholic faith, and that their divine mission was to stamp out Protestantism. Well, as you know, that didn't work, but they certainly caused a tremendous amount of mayhem and misery for everybody in the process. And they also wasted all their money. At the same time, they had France, who was their arch enemy, and they were all dead scared that France would invade them, which was with good reason too, as Napoleon showed later. And so while they were having this 30 Years' War, France, that was really Catholic, weighed in against the Spanish, so against the Catholic side. and it was a right free for all. And in the end, it ended in 1648 with like a truce. But by that time, Spain had wasted so much money. There was so much internal dissatisfaction with the huge taxes that were levied. It caused massive upheaval in the country, because they mostly taxed the aristocrats were spending the money, and they were taxing the workers. Most of them were rural, and they just gave up and they moved to the cities. So you had the cities bursting at the seams with all these unemployed people, and productivity went down, so the taxes went up, and the whole vicious cycle went on. Meanwhile, they were plundering the Incas and everybody else for all their silver and gold, but they were just giving it out, bringing it in with one hand and giving it out with four. So it's quite interesting to read just how incredibly inept they were. The thing about the Habsburgs, so these are all Habsburgs, was their one great skill was in having children and making sure the children survived to the next generation. Unfortunately, they married very tightly within their own family circle, so it was mostly first cousins. So usually the Spanish would marry the Austrians and then backwards and forwards. And they already had a genetic defect in that they had a bit of a pronounced jaw. Some of them couldn't speak, and literally could not speak because their jaw was so big that they couldn't get their mouth open. They had to be fed by a straw. They also had various other deficiencies, mostly mental. And so their advisors were really the bureaucracy, ran things. The king himself had limited power, and they got a lot of bad advice, and they chose to follow the wrong advice. So it's a real exercise in how you could squander an immense fortune in the most unfortunate way. But in the process, they also had the golden age. So Philip II was the golden age of Spain. Under Philip IV, it was still going on. You had Hieronymus Bosch. So there's obviously this very close tie because of Charles V being Dutch himself. And this is Hieronymus Bosch. They've got a number of magnificent large pieces by him. We have then in a later time, so now you're moving towards the time when I showed you the 1790, you have Goya as the state painter. Goya is one of my favorites. I didn't really know him before I moved to Spain, or when we would do our trips to Spain, but I've got to really love his works. He was absolutely ridden with guilt because he was the court painter, so he had to paint really nice paintings and make them look really, really good. And remember that they were both ugly and also mostly mentally deficient. So painting them to look like regal characters is quite a challenge. This is Ferdinand VII, who was about as murderous a bastard as you could ever imagine. So Goya had done a huge number of drawings, which you can see. They weren't published in his lifetime. I'm not showing you any, but here he really shows all the problems that were going on at the time. Social problems with the French, because the Bourbons had taken over the Spanish line had run out, and the French Bourbons took over as their successors, and the French just plundered the place, and they plundered Spain as hard as they could. Ferdinand left, and then Ferdinand was brought back by the people. They sort of had a revolution. He came back. They said, this is wonderful. A year later, he had them under his thumb again, and he was exploiting them even worse than they'd been exploited before. So, just through the 1700s, it just went right through. And then, so Goya had really bad conscience about this, and he lived in this little cottage, and he painted the most grotesque black paintings, which were only discovered later and luckily have been kept. And so you see, and eventually he went into exile and he died in Provence. Fascinating character, wonderful artist. There are obviously others in the Prado Museum, the Fra Angelico. Here we have Rubens in all his fleshy excess. As you know, he was the main bugler for the Counter-Reformation with the Roman Catholic Church, trying to get people back into the church by doing the opposite of what the Puritans, the Puritans were going sort of all dressed in black and total austerity. And so the Roman Catholic Church gave them as much excess of color and as many square meters of naked female flesh as you could possibly have, and brought, they came in their droves back into the churches again. Obviously, we have Dürer, a person who loved himself more than anyone else. I think he was a real Narcissus, but obviously also a good painter. He was the greatest self-marketer that's probably ever existed. And more Roger van der Weyden, one of my absolute favorites. And so that's the Prado Museum. It is huge. You need at least 2 days to go to it and to go through it. It's incredible. And every piece is a masterpiece. So there's another museum there called the Thyssen-Bornemisza, one that's less known. So you all know the ThyssenKrupp industry, German, big steel and wartime munitions producer. So Bornemisza, this was the wife, Thyssen-Bornemisza. She wanted to give her huge collection somewhere, and Madrid got it. This is stupendous because you don't really know the pieces very well, and it's always great to see new ones. So here we have Raphael, we have Franz Hals, we have Max Beckmann, George Gross. This is Berlin in the 1920s. The absolute, just everything going on there. Fantastic painting. You have Kirchner, so all of the Die Brücke, some fantastic Picasso pieces, wonderful Impressionist works, very good modern works. So that's a great museum. Then you have the Regia Sophia. So Regia means queen. So this is Queen Sophie. And this is a modern art museum. A lot of DALI. This one is one of his 3 greatest paintings. It's called The Masturbator. And you'll see here he has, the head is on the side. He always does this thing where you have heads, and if you look from a different direction, it's something else. Locusts, full of all of his symbolism. We'll see more about DALI later. It also has the Guernica. And if you remember, Guernica was bombed, I think, in 1936 or 1937 by the Luftwaffe, the German Luftwaffe, assisted by the Italian fascists. This was, the 3 fascists get together, and there's a bit of a parallel in the last American presidency. And this was a huge piece that he painted. I don't know if it's 30 feet wide, 40 feet wide. And this went on tour through all the cities in the world. And it was Picasso, who was also from Catalonia, just like DALI was. And he was raising funds for the revolution. Picasso got out of there. He did do a little bit for it. DALI obviously disappeared as fast as he could, leaving all his revolutionary friends behind to die. And eventually he came back in 1948 and was big friends with Franco. So, but he was a worm. Picasso had more backbone, and as you know, DALI always felt inferior to Picasso. It drove him throughout his life to try and become the greatest, and he knew he couldn't. So this is just a stunning piece. You might remember, if you remember the one where I showed you that some of these, that this figure here actually comes from an ancient manuscript, which was produced in, I think, 600 or 800 AD. Fantastic. There's also a lot of local painters that you probably don't know, like this mosquito painting the chain gang with the wife going along next to it. So that's a wonderful museum, an art gallery. You can see Madrid is packed with the most fantastic art galleries and places to visit. One of them that's less known is Sorolla's house. So Sorolla painted around the turn of at the end of the 1900s, so the 19th century. So the 19th century through to the 20th. Those of you in New York will know the Spanish American Museum. He painted a vast number of paintings that are exhibited there. Unfortunately, it's still closed at the moment because the building was falling down the hill. But so anyway, he was very much a painter of light, and he did a lot of people in the sea and the skin, the color of the skin and everything. This is his wife, It's a bit darker than it should be, but he was very, one of his things was trying to paint white and the different shades of white. This is a sort of pinkish white, but you'll see it's blue and green and everything else. He's spectacular. This was actually a sort of social activist painting, and it wasn't that much appreciated at his time. So you must think this is about 1880, 1890. These are four young women going to become prostitutes in the big city, probably Barcelona. And this old lady is going along to make sure that they get there. And so there was incredible poverty, especially in Catalonia, and he's protesting this. And obviously, any visit is not complete if you don't go to the bull ring. And we went there, very exciting to see all the different elements with the guys on the horse with the lances and the picadors and everything else. And it's part of their culture. It's very colorful, and well, I certainly enjoyed it. So the other thing that was built by Philip II, you remember, between Charles V and Philip II, they built the Madrid, and they also built El Escorial. So El Escorial was their sort of summer residence to get out of the city, and it's not very far off to the left here. It's mostly, so it was half monastery. This is the monastery bit, and then it's half is their own quarters, and this was their quarters. And it's just immense in size. So I'm going to just get down here. You can see Ura there, and you can see just how big this thing is. And it's entirely intact. It's basically in the middle of nowhere. And this is the library, quite stunning library, huge, huge place with all of the classical paintings up on the ceiling. And it's just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And of course, a lot of El Grecos and all sorts of other paintings. Unfortunately, again, you weren't allowed to take pictures there. So that's the end of Empire. And we now are coming through to the modern time. So you'll see we've in the various chunks. And I've chosen, because I haven't really shown you much of Catalonia. I've shown you Aragon, I've shown you Andalusia, I've shown you Castilla. Now I want to show you Catalonia, and I'm going to show it in two parts. The first is to show you Antoni Gaudi, an architect, and then I'm going to show you DALI. So this is modernism in Spain. And the interesting thing about Barcelona is that where Barcelona, all of these northern states were always separate from the Castilian fold. So Castile ruled, the Castilians ruled Spain, and basically they still do. The king, if you think of the way that the king of Spain behaved towards the Catalonians in this last uprising, where they had the little yellow ribbons, they haven't changed at all. They centralization, centrist, and they don't care about what happens out in the outer areas. But what it did mean was that where the rest of Spain more or less missed the Industrial Revolution, Barcelona and Catalonia grabbed it with both hands. They got immense wealth. They were very democratically run. They were run by the middle class, and there were no kings or anything like that. And they did very, very well. So they were able, so here we have Catalonia up here, and this little state probably generated more wealth than the rest of Spain put together, because they were so successful with the Industrial Revolution, didn't have all the structures in place that stopped it. So here we are, that you could see where Barcelona is. Probably most of you have been there. A wonderful city, very lively, and with fantastic cafes to go into, just a spectacular place to walk around, and you don't have to go in anywhere, but you can. And one of the, so here, one of their things is, this is a specifically Barcelonian thing, is to have pictures of famous people on the toilet. And they think this is a really good idea. So here you see Putin and Franco, etc. So Antoni Gaudi, because you have these, so Antoni Gaudi lived, I think, from about 1850 to 1926 or something like that. He was actually hit by a tram when he was walking to work, so a bit of an ignominious end. But he was a brilliant architect, and he was really a naturist as well. So he took his inspiration from nature and from geometry and shapes and things like that. And he had a clientele that was prepared to push the boundaries because they were incredibly wealthy, and it was all nouveau riche. And so they didn't have any history to hold them back. And he was the man of the moment. Here you see the Casa Vicens, which was his first building. The architecture is not so spectacular, but the colors are just magnificent. The Casa Batlló, these are his famous buildings on the left. We're going to look at those, and they're all world protected monuments. So this is the Casa Batlló, which is basically a multi-story apartment building, not too big, but you can see the colors on the front. We're going to see quite a bit about this. Beautifully done. Look at the plasticity of the balconies and all the way up there. Here we are in one of these. This is one of the balconies. You step out and they take your picture. This is here. You're looking down the shaft. So this is the ground floor down here, and these are the apartments going up. So this is the central shaft of the building, where the elevator goes up on the one side, and these are the apartments. Here's a front door. So what Gaudi did is he did everything. He designed the doors, very much like Frank Lloyd Wright. He designed the furniture. These are like two chairs that are joined together. This is the ceiling in a bedroom, and this is the light in the ceiling. So this is, the light was only about so big anyway, so it's not that, it's quite small, but the attention to detail. But here you can see, if you think of seashells and the shapes from nature, this is what he took and then he put into his buildings. This here is an inglenook fireplace. So an inglenook fireplace is one where you've got seats on the inside. There's a fireplace and you'd sit inside there and read or talk or do whatever. You think in England they were pretty popular, but this one doesn't. I don't think it would be. It's not an open fireplace; it's an enclosed fireplace. Here you see the entrance into. This is from the living room into the next room in this one apartment. You could see just the spectacular, absolutely spectacular shapes and colors and usage of everything. He reused old scrap ceramics. He pioneered a lot of different methods. Here you've got turtles going up what is the back of a dragon. So he had these animal shapes in the building. And these are the chimneys. So obviously with each of those fireplaces has a chimney, but he didn't think that you just have a normal chimney. A chimney should make a statement, and nobody normally bothers up on the roof of a house, but he sure did. So here you see La Pedrera, which is a bigger apartment block that was built by a speculator. It didn't actually do that well financially initially, but then finally it did. And you can see here as well the wrought iron, these sinuous shapes, all the chimneys in their various shapes. Well, I'll show you more. This is looking at the well of the building. You can see it's quite a large building, but it was also done so that there would be light and air coming into the apartments themselves. So he was quite advanced in his architectural thinking. Here you see a close-up of the balcony itself. So this is stuff that he designed. Here we have the entrance with using paintings and using also different glassware here in order just to turn what is a normal apartment building into an absolute work of art. Here you see going up to the first floor where you go inside. There was a very big apartment at the bottom there. Here are the door handles that he designed, various handles and that he designed for the usage in the building. Here you see again one of the doors, and you can see this sort of dado rail that he made out of wood running, nothing square, nothing symmetrical. Here's the top, and quite incredible. You just look at these, I don't know what these are, it's like Darth Vader masks. I'll show you the various, and you walk around on the top there and it's just spectacular. you see his use of reusing old ceramics into and now this is the roof. So this is he used brick in order to hold the roof of the building up. And the idea was he took from the whale. So if you look at a whale's back and the rib cage, this is the inspiration for this attic. And here you see the bricks coming in a star shape. He didn't do much drawing at all, Gaudi. He mostly did models. This is quite normal if you think Brunelleschi with for the Florence Cathedral had a model. In fact, the previous designing of it was done also with a model. They basically do the model, have it there, and the people would come and build it. And they might have a two-dimensional drawing so they knew sort of the distances that things were meant to be in this relative sizes. So here you see, this is a church. This one here is a church which is outside the city, which we didn't go to see. And he made a wireframe, and using the wireframe, that's what they built from. This was used in order to design the ceiling. So basically what he did is he took chains, and the way that the chains hung down, that was the structure for the ceiling. So he's actually, because gravity is pulling this thing in all the directions in the correct way, he knew that it would be right architecturally. Something you've got to get your head around, but it's pretty fascinating that he was a completely different thinker. And the wonderful thing was in Barcelona at the time that there was this environment of people that were sponsoring this sort of art and architecture. Here you see more of his furniture. And now we get to the Park Güell. So this is a park outside, well, not outside Barcelona, but up on the hills. This is the sea over here. This is probably about 3 or 4 miles, about 5, 6 kilometers. It goes uphill. And this is a park that was built in order to have people coming and wandering around, bit of a Disneyland in a way. Here you'll see La Sagrada Familia, the great church, which we're going to go to afterwards. And so this guy Güell was probably the richest industrialist of all. We're going to see the private house that he built. So he built this thing, and the idea is people would come and they'd pay money to go there. These are the houses that are on the property. And you can see the intense colors everywhere. So this is like a raised platform, and this is behind it is a building underneath. So there's a building there, and these are the skylights over here. And you can see this, again, sinuous shape, all very colorful, resembling a snake or a dragon. Like this one, this is the iconic picture of Barcelona. They always bring this here. I'm not too sure why he had this lighthouse type crucifix holder. I mean, it's just so full of spectacular ideas. Here, this is the dragon. This is actually in the Gaudi Museum. This isn't the original. This is a copy, but you can see the dragon that he makes there. And this is the walkway. So what happens is you can walk around, you walk here, there's a path at the top. And but the fantasy is just is spectacular. So we get to La Sagrada Familia. La Sagrada Familia he was building for, I think, the last 40 years of his life, and it's still not finished. It was, when we were there, they said that it was going to be finished in 2024, I think, was going to be finished. Well, it's still going to be finished in 2024, but not the building, just something. So this is over 100 years in building, probably over 140 years in building. This is very much like the cathedrals, the Gothic cathedrals, which took, Cologne took, I think, 800 years to 600 years to build. And a lot of them took 300 or 400 years. So he didn't leave plans, he left sketches. He did left quite a few models. Fortunately, some of them got damaged. And so people have been continuing building this. So there's some bits that he did, and there's been 100 years since he died. So there've been generations of the same family working on this. It's like La Sagrada Familia. It's fascinating to read about their histories, if nothing else. And anyway, so here you see, this is something like you've never seen before. He takes the old Gothic cathedrals and he takes nature and natural shapes, and he takes all of these different things and blends them together. And his whole modernist approach blends them together in something new. Here you see, this is where the main altar is. And so you have this incredible gold effect, which is below it is this parachute. And you have Jesus basically parachuting down over the altar. Is the shapes here, his staircases are just wonderful. Here's one lot of staircase, here's another. Obviously, there were no electric elevators in his day. And here he does one that's much more classical in shape and design, not so modern. These are all within the same building. This is a view. If I looked up at the ceiling, and his idea was that a pillar was a tree. So you can see the joints here are sort of like the branches forking, and many trees make a forest. So he wanted this building to look like a forest, and you're in a forest, which was almost druidic if you think back to Celtic times, because they worshipped in the forest and not in buildings. But I don't know that he was particularly making that reference. Here you'll see the 4 signs of the evangelist in the traditional fashion. Each of these things has a meaning. The numbers of columns, the this and the that, it all has meanings, and there's things attached to it. Here you see the colors coming in. This is purely produced by the colors of the stained glass windows. You see details of the tops of the pillars. You can see that nothing is straight, but it all is incredibly well done from a load-bearing perspective. It's very well thought through. Engineering is spectacular. So you see here more of them. You have these galleries. Again, you can imagine all the metalwork is done in his particular style. It is an amazing experience to be in a building like this. So here this is the east side of the building. So the east side is the side of Jesus's birth. So it's nativity. So it's cool and calm, and colors are greens and blues. This is the west side. The west side is the passion side. The passion means, generally in Christianity, means the torture and the death of Jesus. And so this is red and orange and dramatic. And so you basically go from this side to that side, and it's in the same place. It's wonderful. Here you go. This is the door out to the west side. So this has all been done in modern times. And in actual fact, I prefer the modern. I'll show you the difference between what he did and they did. So these are the doors that people come in. So here we're looking back into the church from the west side, from the north side, sorry. No, from the west side, that's right, from the west side, the passion side. And you can see these huge pillars, the huge towers going up. Then here you have, this is the 12 stations of the cross, and they're all done very graphically in this sort of blockish style, something that I thought was incredibly effective. This is not original Gaudi, but they're trying to do it in his way. Here you have Jesus. Let me duck here. This is the column where he's tied to. There's the rope, and he's tortured. Here you see him dragging his cross, etc. The doors are done spectacularly. This is an interesting square. It adds up to 33 in every direction, whichever way you go. Of course, Jesus was meant to have died at 33. I think this was Golgotha. I mean, you could really put your face close and look at this. It's just wonderful stuff. This is actually a plan of it. You can see the different columns, and if you go in close on this, you can see the 12 of this lot. So here you got the 12 towers here representing the 12 apostles, and etc. etc. So it all had meaning. This is the east side, which is the side that Gaudi himself did. This is the nativity side, And it's sort of like a Tropfsteinhöhle, you know, where you've got the secretions running down on a cave, not as clearly defined as on the west side, which is the more modern, the more angular approach. Interestingly enough, he got into trouble about this one, because this column over here rests on a turtle or a tortoise. And as you know, the Hindus believe that the universe rests on the back of a tortoise. And if you're a Terry Pratchett fan, as I am, you'll know that that tortoise is carrying something else on its back and they're going through space. So he riffs on it too. Anyway, Gaudi built, although he was very religious himself, he wasn't above building all sorts of interesting and sometimes but controversial things into his architecture. Here you see the whole nativity scene. As I say, it's all very sort of, I don't actually like that much, but it's a style he did. So here you have the spires, and on top of it, you've got these sort of bowls of fruit and all sorts of things. I don't know what it represents. And you can see behind me here, these different fruity things. These are huge too. They're probably, 16, 20 feet high, massive things. This is the inside of one of the towers. So here you can see people coming down, and they're just I thought, a wonderful shape. And this is the spiral staircase that you go down in the tower. It's in one of the towers, and you could see he's taken as I said, he took his shapes and his forms from nature. He was very much inspired by nature. And this is like the most spectacular thing I've ever seen. The guy luckily stuck his face down just as I was taking the picture. So here we go to Palau Güell. You remember that Güell funded the Park Güell. And this is the elevator. This was a really, this guy had serious buckaroos and he was spending it in style. And so this is not everybody's cup of tea, but it was certainly different. So there's this massive elevator which goes up. There actually, there's an organ and the organ's playing, but I can't do that here. This is looking up in this same space from the bottom, looking upwards. You can see it's just a very different architecture from what you normally have. Some of the windows are within the building. Downstairs, so when you drive into the building, you go down a ramp. This is where the horse carriages went down and where they had the stables. But the interesting thing is, so the air came in through here, then it was ducted from here upwards through the building. So they had a very functional air conditioning system without having to have any mechanics to it. And here you see a toilet and a bathroom. So it's all fairly wacky in a way. Here we are back on the roof, and you can see he also did the chimneys. Here you look at all this work around the balconies. So there's another one that I'm showing you. This is not actually by Gaudi, but it's the same period. The Hospital de São Paulo at St. Cloud. So what I'm saying is that Gaudi wasn't the only person that was doing modernist stuff. This hospital also was not only modern in terms of its architecture, but also scientifically very interesting. So you have here's the model of the thing, and you have this passageway underground passageway running all the way through the hospital and all the way across. So it was very efficient for moving people backwards and forwards. The idea was that in order for people to get better, they need a lot of light and they needed fresh air. And so rather than the dank places that people were stuck in before. So there was a lot of scientific advances. You could see also quite an interesting architecture, the buildings full of tiles, full of different shapes and domes and everything else. This is the operating theater. So this was also a teaching hospital. And so the operations were performed in this round building just with windows. The students would stand outside and watch the people operating inside. Luckily, they weren't doing that when I was there. So, and here's the ward. You can see very high ceilings, a lot of light, cleanliness and everything else. And I think only one person to a bed. If you think back to the one that I showed you in Beaune in Burgundy, there were 4 to a bed. which wasn't nice, especially when they had the plague. So we get to the final section, which is surreal Spain. And Joan Miró is from Barcelona. So there's a big Joan Miró art gallery. You can go there. Possibly you like it. I don't. This goes beyond my liking too, but it's all very symbolic. You go to Bilbao. So here's Bilbao up here in Basque Country. You have the Guggenheim Museum, and it is spectacular architecture, and it also has an incredible modern art exhibition. This dog was put up, I forget the name, I think it's an American artist who created this dog. You can see how big it is, made out of flowers, and the people liked it so much. It was meant to be dismantled after the opening ceremonies, that the city adopted it, and the city maintains the dog, which has also become a bit of an icon for the city, I think. And now we go to Dali, Salvador Dali. He was, as I said, born in Catalonia, actually in Figueres. We'll come to Figueres. He had a very extroverted personality, and it was a very deliberate. He built himself. He knew he wasn't that good at painting. He was a very good detailed graphic artist. He could do small drawings very well. He wasn't good at big. So his big ones were just basically lots and lots of small ones. And he said, in order to be great, you have to be able to paint big paintings like Guernica or like Titian did, or that sort of thing. He knew he couldn't. So he compensated with an outrageous lifestyle, which was very carefully portrayed to the world. And part of that was the house that he had. So this house here is his house in Cadanque. I don't know exactly how you pronounce it, but Cadanque, I think it is. And he took over this house, built it, and it's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary place. Here you see the outside. In order to be invited in here, you had to, people hung around in the neighboring village for weeks trying to wangle an invite. And if you made it here, you really made it. You'll see this like a teacup for the plants. He's sort of standing in one of the doorways. This is his living room, which was circular. He had these little portals where you could see outside. This was his little ingle nook. He had all sorts of weird things. And when you come in through the entrance, the house itself is not big, and the rooms are fairly small, but they're incredibly eclectic. He had this huge bear sitting there, and you'll read people, right, talking about their experience with all of this. He was very wacky. He had this incredible swimming pool with these strange sort of large serpent-looking objects. He had this famous, this is the original of the famous couches. There's the original positioning of it. He was a great one for this egg symbol. You'll see that later in another area. Here he made this giant out of junk in his garden. You can see it's fairly arid around there. So now we get to Figueres. This is the town that he was born in, and he opened a theater. I think he might have taken over, bought a theater and turned that into his museum. So this is his theater museum. So here's the outside. You see all the eggs at the top. There's just crazy stuff. Here's the front of it. And this is on the inside. There's actually an antique car sitting down the bottom here. He made a lot of jewelry, which I wasn't aware of. And this is some of the sort of semi-jewelry stuff that he did. A lot of his stuff is done by using perspective. So here, when you lined yourself up, the couch and the sideboard and whatever this, and then these two paintings make a face. He loved doing this whole, especially in his later phase, loved doing that. He painted the ceiling so that it was one of these three-dimensional ceilings. He has all these different paintings. This is his wife, who was quite a character, one might say, and his muse, various sculptures, his different paintings. It's a huge, huge building, which he put all of his works in. I wouldn't say they're the best works, because the best works he sold. He loved money, DALI did. He used to, his favorite time of the day was sitting at breakfast table, signing copies of his drawings, and which were mimeographs, sort of in those days, sort of photocopied. And then because he signed it, he said it was original, and his secretary went to jail for that because he had made the copies. DALI got off scot-free. He called it printing money. And this was his favorite occupation. He also never carried any cash on him. He always paid by check, because he said the check is going to be worth more than the face value, than the money written on it. So no one's ever going to cash it, and they're going to keep the check, which they did. And he was a bit of a scrounge as well as everything else. So the best paintings were sold. So then Gala, his wife, who was Russian and with a prodigious sexual appetite, even in her mid-80s, he got too much for her. So she wanted to move away. So he built this castle for her in PUBOL. So there's PUBOL, here's Figueres, here's Kadankha, they're all pretty close together. And this castle is also seriously wacky. This is the end, this is the hall, the lounge area. This is the ceiling of the lounge. This is the bathroom with the faucets that he designed. This is the crypt where she is buried. And the idea was this: he was meant to be buried here and she was buried there, but it didn't come that way. And he's actually buried in the theater. And they try to get him moved, but it didn't work out. He has, this is the garden. This is the swimming pool, which is quite over the top. The famous elephants. You're walking in the garden, you see these massive famous elephants of his. And that would be the end of that. So I will stop sharing my screen and I'll stop the recording.